me?
I can hear you, but Bingen has issues, I guess.
Okay. Bingen, it looks like you're on mute. Yeah, try it now. How's that? All right, we'll wait for him to join back on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, now I can hear you. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Cool.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, audio works. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. Thank you all for joining. Welcome to another Forta workshop where we highlight how the largest projects in Web3 use Forta to monitor the security and health of their protocols. Today, I'm joined by Robert and Bingen from Liquidity. Liquidity was one of the first users of Forta. They provided great feedback and support along the way. So excited to dive into exactly how and why they are using Forta. So gentlemen, welcome. I want to start off with sort of a softball question, which is, why is real-time monitoring important to your team? Why do you do it?
Yeah, well, short answer would be to react quickly, of course, like time is of the essence. And then this can be for many reasons, but in our case, and I guess it's the main use case for Forta is for security. And I mean, we have seen so many hacks recently, so like the space is quite hot in that regard. And yeah, if there's something going on, either an attack or either a bug in our system, we want to be able to react as quick as possible. And yeah, we have a lot of invariants, and we have, security is super important for us. If you go to DeFi safety, you'll see that we are like top 3, I think, or top 2, so like 97%. So we have like 3 audits, and we have thorough tests. And we have a list of invariants that we provided to the editors, and these have been tested with unit tests and with fuzzing and everything. But still things can happen, and it's different testing in prod, and other integrations can come, or like flash alarms or new things that may appear. So you're never completely calm and safe when it's about security. So and any tool that we can use, we certainly want to use.
And maybe one thing to add here is that we want to be the first one to be informed, of course. Like if there is something, we would want to use the time to react accordingly. And what's funny is that, our system, I'm not sure if the audience knows, is completely immutable. So it means you cannot simply upgrade it or patch it. But even still, there are things that we could do on the front end, for example, if there is something like that needs to be kind of adapted, or like even just like emergency communication in the worst of all situations. So it's great to have this kind of alerting and monitoring mechanism in place.
Yeah.
And Bingen, you said something interesting, which is you want the ability to react quickly. And I want to highlight that just because, monitoring and alerts go hand in hand with like incident and emergency response, right? Once you get the alert, then you have to have, the ability to actually respond, and that requires you to think about how you're going to respond ahead of time and have a plan, and understand who's responsible and things like that. So.
Yeah, definitely, and this is something that we have like a contingency plan built. Like we even have built scripts to do even a potential migration. Like we're like prepared for the worst case scenario, so we don't waste or lose time, and especially under pressure, so we can trigger the system again from scratch and then migrate all the balances and everything. Because as Robert said, our system is immutable, so we can just not fix the bug and upgrade, and that has like upsides and downsides. And so we are ready for that. Because it wouldn't make sense to have real-time monitoring and know it quickly, but then took 1 month to prepare the migration. It would be pointless. and yeah, it's something we from time to time we talk about, and and we have also like planned some trainings for like try it and try to improve the process and make sure, and also even from the communications and side and everything. So yeah, this is something we think about, and the velocity at which we can react is important, definitely.
All right, I want to pick this conversation back up, but let's dive into some use cases real quick. So I'm gonna start easy, and I would usually at this time I would go to the Forta app. I would pull up the Liquidity page, but there is no Liquidity page because your bots and alerts are private. So I guess last question before we jump into some of the use cases is why did you want your bot code and your alerts to be private? Because it is something that a number of teams do ask for.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And actually, if I recall correctly, I think we were one of the first ones to ask for this feature, which was not ready when we first were contacted by you. And by the way, you guys like implemented this so quick. We were impressed, and it helped to make the decision to get on board. Because I mean, it's an interesting question. Like all of our source code is open source, and of course, Ethereum blockchain is public by design. So there's nothing that we can really hide. Like if somebody wants to go analyze our code and see the audits and see like all the properties and invariants of our code, and they want to spend that time, and they could build the bots for themselves. I mean, there's nothing that we can really hide. And that's something good about open source and blockchains. But of course, if it's an attacker, if it's somebody that wants to make harm, that at least we don't want to make it easy for them, and they can just be looking at our agents and be faster than us. So it's just a little measure that we take to gain some time in case there's something wrong. And again, not only for security, even for marketing. Like let's say there's no attack vector, but maybe there's a bug, and we don't want to have funds stuck, and we want to tell people, hey, close your trove quickly or whatever, So,
I think it's very much also related to like kind of responsible bug disclosure. I mean, normally if there is a white hat hacker who sees any bug or issue, would that kind of disclose it privately. It's not that he would make it public. And guys, it's the same principle that we are sticking to here. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's a great point. And we see two schools of thought. I think the thinking you just articulated was shared across a number of teams. And then Megan, you brought up too the fact that all of these contracts and all this code is open, it's public, and in theory, hundreds of people could be watching for these same things, right? I think the reality is though that the only people that are monitoring these systems today are either the core teams or a hacker. But I think we expect over time different stakeholder groups to start paying more attention to sort of what's happening like operationally at the protocol level in real time, because that information is important not just to the core team. Maybe it's important to signers on the multi-sig or other community members, not just the core devs that are responsible for maintaining things. So great. Anyway, thank you for sharing that answer. That was really interesting. Okay, now we're going to dive into some use cases here. So starting easy, I know there are a number of things, and this is common across a lot of our users. They monitor for sort of informational purposes, right? There's activity that's happening block to block that they want to be aware of. Some examples I know in your system are redemptions that have a value over a certain threshold. when fees exceed a certain threshold, when there are under collateralized troves. Again, these are things that you expect to see. They're not particularly suspicious, but you still monitor for them. So curious why you do that. Why is this information interesting to you?
Yeah, good question. To be honest, the main reason for me to add those properties, I was trying to find some properties that were interesting, that were not too verbose, but they were acting kind of like a canary. So because my expectation is like the bad ones will never trigger, and I really hope so, of course. But then it's like I wouldn't know if the system is working right or how it works. So I wanted to see like for real. I wanted to receive an alert. So, but I didn't want to put something obvious that could maybe like clog the system and our Slack channels. So try to find some in between where I could have some interesting information, but at the same time be testing Forta because it was new to us, to anybody, I guess, but also to us. So that was the main reason for
these alerts that are more sort of informational in nature. When the team gets those, is it something that you look at, you acknowledge, and then you move on, or is it something that prompts some action, or is this information sort of more interesting from like a user experience standpoint? I'm just kind of curious, like how you would use something like this.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, just like speaking of the redemptions, I mean, that's something, which is important from a UX perspective, and that's something which, we have been looking a bit into because, I mean, they kind of affect some of the users while keeping the peg kind of stable, and that is of a particular interest to us. Right now, we have been digging into that a bit.
Yeah, exactly. We're analyzing that info. We're building some scripts and trying to analyze why this is happening, because sometimes it's because, like as Robert said, like the main reason is to help the peg, but sometimes there's no need to, like LUSD is not trading really below, but people are redeeming. So we want to try to analyze why people are doing that, how we can mitigate it, potential solutions. So there's definitely a reaction. And as I said, even with those canary agents, we were trying to get some information, just not be some kind of a spam or annoying us. And even like the borrowing fees, for instance, it says it's greater than 3%. That's really weird. I mean, it has actually never happened.
But it was an accident. That was a fun story.
Okay,
yeah.
Exactly. But again, it would help us because this was an accident, and actually that this happened before having the Forta agent. But we're like looking into that, like, hey, what's going on here? So there's some info, there's some reaction, and it helps to know our users, and maybe even from the front end side, like maybe things are not clear for them. Who knows? Like, but yeah, it's helpful for sure, or we try to make them helpful.
So I want to bring up another example too, which is the recovery mode. I know that's something that if and when the system does go into that mode, can you kind of unpack why, I guess, what the nature of that is, and why that's something you need and want real-time alerting on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Robert can explain better, but first thing to tell about recovery mode is like it's recovery. It's not emergency mode, so it's like it's something we don't want to happen. But it's not bad per se. Like so, the system is designed to work in the recovery mode, and the system is designed to leave recovery mode as soon as possible. But it's not like we are pausing the system or like emergency shutdown or this kind of stuff that you can see, especially in upgradable systems. So it's part of the system, and it's supposed to happen only if there's a big crash of ETH crash, and it has happened only once so far, and for a really short time, and it worked really well. I mean, it was so stressful because it happened like, what was it, like 1 month after we launched or something, so really soon. And it was quite scary. but it worked really well. And it's something, when we're in recovery mode, again, it has happened only like a few minutes or maybe less once. So we're going to be like monitoring absolutely everything, each transaction, and see that everything works again and it goes back up. And yeah, I don't know, Robert, if you want to add something about that, but I don't want a lot of people out of recovery mode. It's part of the system. That's the main message we want to have here.
Yeah, I think recovery mode, I mean, similarly to like redemptions, it's not an issue for the system. I mean, it may be an issue for some of the users that are affected, because during recovery mode, people can be liquidated up to 150% collateral ratio, which is much higher, than what you would usually have in normal operation. So that's why it's can be like a bad outcome for the user. So we want to be sure that this only happens when it should, and that recovery mode is avoided as best as it can be avoided. But yeah, I mean, from the system's perspective, it's something that is not like per se a technical issue or anything like that. No,
Sorry, I can hear you.
You're muted, I guess.
Yes, I am. Okay. So my question was, sometimes teams want alerts on things just so that they have assurance that something they expect to see actually happened. And then there's another category of alerts that you never expect to see, but you want to know right when it happens, right? So is something like recovery mode, is the value of that alert, is it something that you will expect to get in that moment, and you just want to, and sort of the alert is just sort of the confirmation that you're actually sort of moving that direction? Or is it something that, will be a surprise, and for that reason you want it as soon as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be a surprise. I mean, at least personally, I check the total collateral ratio often, like daily basis, yet. And also, it's supposed to happen if it is crashing. And I mean, when you're in this space, this is something that you see coming probably.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows? Like, maybe, I don't know, I'm on vacation and then I see a notification on Slack, but somebody from the team would know for sure. So it would be really hard that it comes as a surprise. But again, it's something that it's part of the system. It's not bad per se, but again, we want to avoid that, because to start with, as Robert said, is bad UX, because they can be liquidated at a higher threshold. And the system is supposed to leave recovery mode quick. So we want to be monitoring that constantly. Yeah.
That just occurred to me now. I mean, it could make sense for us to even have another alert at a higher collateralization level, because recovery mode is triggered when the total collateralization drops below 150%. What we could also do is maybe set that trigger at 160 or 70%, so that we could send out a message to users.
Yeah.
Users can kind of avoid being hit by recovery mode by kind of repaying their debt. So that, I think there are
definitely that's a good idea. And now that you mentioned that, I also want to add that the list that we have so far is not complete at all. I mean, there's a lot of things that we still can add as Forta agents, and that we plan to do eventually. And definitely that could be one of them.
Okay. Well, really interesting. So we talked about these sort of informational alerts, right? That are, they're interesting. They might not necessarily prompt a response, but the data is useful to the team. And then there are some other things that are maybe higher severity or less expected, right? Invariances, as you would call them, that things that aren't supposed to happen, and if they do happen, either operationally there's something going wrong, or potentially there's a threat. So the first one that I want to call out is the trove ordering. I know this is important to the functioning of Liquidity. Like, why is this important to monitor, and and what happens if you get that alert?
Maybe I can say a few words why we have this ordering in the first place, and then maybe Bing, you can say why we need to monitor for it. But yeah, I mean, this kind of goes down to our redemption mechanism. We have this kind of mechanism where people can redeem LUSD at face value for Ether, but it means that you get, like, for one LUSD, you get basically $1 worth of Ether, and the place where the system takes the Ether from to give it to the redeemer is determined, is basically the troves, but it's determined in the order of collateralization ratio. So whenever somebody redeems, it means that the system basically uses the LUSD to repay the lowest collateralized trove, and then if it's not enough to give out enough Ether, it would continue with the next one, and so on. So there is this ordering in place to make it so that redemptions can go up the linked list, so to say, of troves in ascending order of collateralization ratio. So that's kind of the high level need for this ordering.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens, I guess what happens first is that I panic, probably. And like, it would be a bug in the system for sure. So this is one of the invariants that we really, really hope, and we are kind of confident that it won't happen. But as I said, it's the same that we use unit tests and fuzzing and all the tools available. That's another one. If there's a bug, we want to know quick. What would happen, as Robert said, that it could have impact in UX impact, because somebody that it's not like below on the list could be redeemed against, and that would be like unfair, which, I mean, wouldn't be so bad, but it would be bad. But then the problem is, like, why did that happen, and what's like the origin of the bug, and can it have other consequences? So that would be our first action, like try to analyze the bug, analyze why it happened, reproduce the transaction that made it happen, and then again fix it and take the needed action, either alerting users or deploying a new system or whatever. But this is a very extreme case. Also, we wanted to have like a list of different, from really informational to extreme cases that are like the most unlikely thing to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, you answered my next question, which was going to be, if you get an alert that something like this, something very unexpected, high severity happens, what do you do with it? And you sort of walk through like what would manually happen on the Liquidity side. So that was interesting to hear.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it would be like a war room, as they call it. Like, we would get all the team together, probably the auditors too. We would try to reach them, so to have all hands-on possible to analyze quickly the bug and to be able to work under pressure. And as I said, like, we have all the reaction plan, the contingency plan to once we, so to deploy a new system and migrate the balances and all this stuff. But each bug is different. So first you think you need to fix the bug, and that's the only uncertain point in all the process.
That's great. Okay, well, gentlemen, I made it through the use cases I wanted to cover here. So thank you so much for thank you so much for sort of explaining, why you monitor these things and the value that those alerts have to the team. For those listening, I want to thank Robert and Bingen again for joining. Keep an eye out for more one-on-one workshops like this, where we explore how the largest teams in Web3 are using Forta to monitor the security and health of their systems. Gentlemen, thanks again. Have a good day.
Yeah, I also want to say thanks to the Nethermind team, because they help us with the agents in, well, I guess you can explain better the problem that you have. And they were like their job was impressive, and they were super helpful all the time. So I want to say thanks to them.
Yeah. And also thanks for building
Absolutely.
the whole Forta.
And of course to Forta. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess for those listening or watching in the future, protocol teams can, if they don't have the capacity to develop the bots in-house, they can outsource it. And we have a number of development teams, of which Nethermind is one, that works with teams like Liquidity. They'll help them come up with requirements, or they'll take requirements that the team themselves create, and they'll build those bots and then pass them over to the team for publishing and then subscription. So that is an option. So if you don't have developer bandwidth in-house, but you still want the benefit of Forta, we're happy to connect you with one of the dev teams like Nethermind. So thanks for bringing that up, Megan. I appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, gentlemen. Well, thanks again for joining. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's a great conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye.